Welcome back, everyone, to another episode. I think this might be 300 of Profluence Sports. Have Rich Odell on today. Met him through his daughter, actually, and we've had a lot of the sports academies and prep schools and had a lot of interesting conversations and reports around it. And there are people, and there are, I don't want to say in the shadows, but there are a lot of people that have shaped a lot of this that aren't out in the public eye as much, but really do a lot with it. And Rich is certainly that. So, Rich, appreciate you hopping on today and excited for this conversation.
Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Of course. So, kick us off. Just give us quick. We don't have to. It would be fun to have a 2-hour conversation of everything you've ever done and built and how you thought about it and how it evolved. But give us high level, right? You did IMG and some of the school stuff there. You did Spire. You're now doing MAI in Boston. You work with a ton of the PE firms and private schools across, I think, the world, not just the country. So tell us a little bit, about the work that you've done in the space.
I think the best way to start, Andrew, is that I started as a musician. What's in my blood is arts, but the parallels between arts and sports are immense. And so having run art schools, Interlochen Center for the Arts, Chicago Academy for the Arts, I realized quickly that the parallels between the sport world and the arts world were such that we needed to get in bed together and think more about what's best for kids. And out of that came this opportunity that has been in development for 8 years, which is Masters Academy International. We started this with the idea with two brothers, the Masters brothers, Peter and Chris, who were well-known hockey players, semi-pro and in college, and believed that there needed to be a better opportunity for kids athletically in the New England area, but also for across the country. And our conversations when they first contacted me were about what could we do here that would be different than IMG? What could be different than Spire? And I said, well, number one, the location is a very educationally driven entity and location. And
I'm a Boston U grad, so I know all about the Boston schools.
So in terms of high tech also, to be in an arena where you can give kids exposure to corporate world from sport and outside of sport, to the education arena, to the professional sport process and direction the kids can choose to go, all of those things to me said we can make something really unique. And so that's what I believe MAI is. MAI is an institution opening September 15th of this year. On 82-acre campus in a 360,000 square foot facility with another adjacent building with brand new soccer, lacrosse fields, brand new baseball diamonds. Will be a new basketball pavilion facility being built starting in about 5 months from now, all of which is to give kids the right environment for sport development, but not in any way compromising their academic environment or compromising their personal growth or compromising their potential career preparation. Career preparation is probably the piece that is most different than the other institutions that I've been part of athletically, in that what we are creating is an institution where you can come and major in sport and play it for 4 hours a day and have 5 hours of academics, top tier academics, nothing compromised there by any stretch of the imagination. But you also have the personal skill piece. That's the third pillar, where there is an element woven into every week with words or phrases that are about underpinning those other pieces of your life that need to have some development concurrent with your academic and your athletic development. The fourth pillar is the career prep. And what that allows at MAI is you can come as a non-playing sport major. So it means that you have a love for sport, but you know you're not good enough to maybe play at the collegiate level and clearly not going to go pro, but you love it. And so how do you get to make that your first of what ultimately for high school kids today will be 5 to 7 professions, totally different across the spectrum? But how do you stay in that area that you've had a passion for probably since you were 7 years old? And for us, that means that you can come and major in sports medicine, sports psychology, sports management, sports marketing, sports broadcasting, and a plethora of other majors that are partnerships with universities and partnerships with professional pathways organizations in the Boston and around the country. So that allows a student who, while could get 2,800 hours of instruction in their sport, between their strength and conditioning, mental conditioning, and the playing of the sport, you can come and get 2,800 hours over 4 years in a non-playing sport major. which is a pathway, not all of them, that leads right to the workforce. It is more of a guarantee to a family that their child is, if they got hurt, still able to stay in that area that they have a love and work and earn a living. We know that going forward, about 50% of the kids who are going to college today do not know what they want to do when they go into college. This is to give them a better security blanket, and parents that their child will get to, out of our experience of high school, get to go someplace and do what they love to do as that first profession with balance of their life, both academically, athletically, and personally. So that's what makes this venture a little different. It is being extremely well received across the board. Our enrollment is close to being closed out for the fall in terms of in the different sports we're offering. And the non-playing sport majors won't start until the second year of the operation. But for the playing sports, just great interest across the country and around the world of people and parents, particularly thinking this is a much more defined program of opportunity for our children. And at the end of the day, it's the kids that matter, right? It's not about us. It's about giving them the tools, the opportunities to both do well and to learn from that and grow.
I love it. And I'm curious, you had mentioned there 4 hours of sport, call it, or around sport, and then about 5 hours of academic. I mentioned in there I played basketball at Boston University. I looked at a bunch of the prep and academies, mainly in the Northeast, through the NEPSAC. I did look at IMG at the time. I did look at Spire, which was brand new at the time, but ultimately was blessed to just go straight to college. From that regard, again, maybe not. Maybe maybe I would have found some other career passion, and we wouldn't be sitting here. But who knows? But I'm curious on how you think, because I went through the public school system. It was, again, what is it, 8-9 hours of education, and they slam like 2 hours of sport. It doesn't feel ideal. It feels rigid, and it feels wrong now. Like thinking about how would even how I build or how humans should work, play. How we divide our days. How do you think what do you think is the perfect formula? Like, as you think through that day, or maybe even just go through a little bit of the schedule of how you guys are thinking about it, MAI, what is that from your perspective, what you've seen and where you're leading and continue to learn as I'm sure more studies and you guys just even have a better ear to the ground as well now?
Well, our day is such that you spend either the morning or the afternoon in academics. You have the option of 3 different programs to deliver all of that. So you can be full in sitting in the classroom. In our classrooms, if you visit campus, and hopefully you will at some point, very non-traditional looking classroom. Everything is on wheels. It's tables. It's all movable. It is all project-based learning. So it's giving kids real life experiences in and out of the sports arena to apply the skills and the knowledge that they need to have to get into their first profession or to prepare them well for their college interest that they might pursue. So that day lets the kids have more of an integrated experience. We try not to create fiefdoms within sports so that the kids get to know other kids in other sports and get to just have an appreciation for how different kids learn, because by sport, it can be different. And so our faculty, most of whom are hired now, are people who have lived this life with some sport experience and clearly a lot of academic experience. So they come at the teaching from the perspective of having been one of the people in those seats. And much like you just described yourself, they know that we all learn differently. They know that you have to go to where the learner is, not expect the learner to come to where your formulaic approach to teaching is the key to that child's success, right? And so the whole program is designed that way. The support structure for kids who are non-traditional learners with a language-based learning difference, those who are struggling with issues that are not connected, maybe to their sport, or connected in some way to their family or to friends, to relationships, all of those things, to have a team that's there trained and sports specific trained to support that, very, very important to the child. There are a lot of kids who come into sport, and I don't mean this disparagingly, but come into a sport because there was something else that they didn't do as well. And so they put their energy into that, but there was some cost to that, right? When I was at IMG, I remember vividly kids coming to say, could we meet with you, Mr. Odell? I have something I want to talk about. What they wanted to talk about was the fact that they were in a sport that they didn't really like. They were in the sport because their parent thought they could be good at it, or their parent didn't get to play the sport at that level, And so they want their child to live that life for them. That's a gross generalization on my part, but the reality is, how do you help a young person like that find the words, find the emotion to have that conversation with a parent, and for the parent to be open to listening to what that child is saying? Because in our situation with MAI, coming out of what I've learned from Spire and IMG, we're not saying that road does not come to an end. There's not a dead end with what you just said, because you love the sport, but here's other pathways to stay engaged in it. So it's that kind of experience. It is also different for us in some respects from IMG and from Spire, in that New England was known historically as hiring triple threats. So the teacher, teach during the day, coach that 2-hour block, and then was your house parent. We're not doing that at MAI. At MAI, it's 3 totally separate faculties: full academic, full coaching faculty, we don't call them just coaches, they're faculty, and a full separate residential life faculty. Why? Because the more exposure a young person can get to a multitude of adults is beneficial for their brain, for their own personal well-being, in terms of how they think about themselves. So if you had only one person doing all 3 of those functions in a school, and one of those did not go well during a given day, the rest of the day is not going to go as well as it should. So we're conscious of that. And these partnerships and relationships that we'll be building with the universities, not just in the Boston area, but with businesses. I'll give you another example of what sets us apart. So we have a full-fledged robotics program at MAI. It's not robots that pick up garbage and do those things. These are human robots, human-sized robots. Why? Because we believe that kids need to be out in front of what's happening and not be at the affect of it, but be in a position to create the effect from it. So for example, as we see umpiring now being done by robots, we know that there's going to be many other points of entry for robots into the sports arena, and it'll come faster than any of us can imagine. And so in our building out partnerships with companies in the Boston area is to give the kids the exposure and let them be part of that development, rather than having to be at the affect of it, help create it. So we will be a destination for new product testing and design in various arenas that also benefit a child interested in sports. So we think we have most of the boxes. I don't know that it's ever all the boxes covered.
Yeah, it's super interesting approach you guys are taking. It seems like it's decades of learning, which is super cool. I wanted to sort of save this for later, but you can't. It's just what's going through my head right now, and it's like, let's just get to it. If I'm thinking it, the listeners are thinking it as well, which is this. I believe, at least personally, and I think a lot of people would, that education has been backwards for a long time. If I would have went to an MAI, I would not have been sitting for 9 hours. The way it came through and why it just doesn't work for me. I'm a visual learner. I need, even how I work for 2 hours, and then I need to walk or work out, and then work. Like, I'm very much, a different learner than I think a lot of people. But to produce, not on just the athlete side, but humans in general, like, this is the advanced, the better model. But only a certain select amount of people are going to have the opportunity to get access to this. Where do you see sort of the future going? Like, are we going to see more models? Does this shift the public? Do you think everything starts to privatize more? I'm just curious from a high level how you think about just education, where it's going, both on what you're doing, but like, how do we apply this elsewhere? And, are we creating more gaps between the people that don't have the opportunity to go to schools like this and the folks that do?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. We have a very, very aggressive and progressive scholarship program, both for merit recognition as well for financial need, because we want to have the space be good for all kids that have an interest and have demonstrated some of the tools that they need in their toolbox in order to be successful within the space that we're creating, right? That's a very important piece. How it's changing from a global perspective, and this is part of what I do talk about with private equity and VC groups regularly, is that education does have to change significantly. The profession is not seen as admirably as what it should be going into teaching, because it's become more of getting through something because somebody's going to be evaluated on that, whether it's the student or the teacher, rather than just saying to a child, if you make this much progress today, that's amazing. Let's celebrate that, right? Because when you do that, you lift that level of belief by them of what they can accomplish, rather than focusing on what they didn't accomplish that day. So the positive reinforcement on the field, in the classroom, in the residence facility is very important across the board. And we've hired people who understand exactly what we mean when we say that, so that they are fully tuned to it. That, I hope, is the beginning of a change. I'm not naive enough to think that I can change the face of education on the planet, but I hope I can make a significant dent in what we're doing to go beyond just this example of the sport arena. But there are easily, and I have the list, there are easily 30 to 40 professions today that are going to be focal professions of the future that many kids in high school today are ready to move into now. They do not need 3 more years of high school of just general education. And I don't mean to negate or minimize the value of education when I say this. I think education has to shift more to meet what the learner's needs are. And technology is clearly changing that. There is a new fear in the education world, and it's the fear of technology, which is not simply by kids, but it's by the adults in the community. It's the faculty, it's the administration, it's the trustees of schools, public or private, chartered, it doesn't matter where a child is going. But how much is this going to change, and what's it going to do to hurt kids more than help them potentially? We have to be at the front end of that. And so I think how we prepare teachers in higher education or through other means to be that effective in the classroom is really critical. And so those other professions, I'm a fan, and I say this, it's not a secret, but we should have schools around the country that allow kids as a high school, as a high school student, to spend 4 hours a day in mechanical engineering because that's what they love, right? Let's recognize all of the youth population around the world that didn't have the opportunity to find sport or to find the arts, to pursue something that is of interest to them at an early enough age for them to develop the right set of skills to advance in that, so that they're not playing from a weak suit, they're playing from a position of strength in their own development.
I have two really good questions, and I don't know which one to go to first, but I'll remember the second one a little bit better. So the first one is, when you look at coaches, and I want to figure out how I preface and set this up right, but like when you look at athletes, right, there's a clear stepping stone of, if I do X, I can get to Y, right? When you look at coaches, even, you could say, hey, if I do really well in high school, maybe I could get a great college job, and then I could maybe get to the pros or wherever you want to fall. You can see progression in both, finances. You can see progression in the level of talent you can deal with. There's a very clear path. When you look at education, it sort of leads to, at least I believe, there's no real KPIs. There's no real incentive. You're actually sort of incentivized to become complacent of, hey, I work 1 year to develop my agenda and get all my documents, and then I teach that same thing for 20 plus years, and there's no real level up in finances. There's no, cool, I get a recognition, but like you said, there's bad incentives around, how you get to those, which might be around SAT scores or some standardized tests. How do we better incentivize or do that on the education side, or where are the gaps? Because if you look at across even MAI, there's a clear path to like how you can even progress on the teaching side, or on the coaching side, and on the athlete side, and on the faculty side. But on the teaching and like education, I don't know how you do that across the board. I'm sure you have some ideas, but how do you view that, and then how is that obviously changing as well with technology?
Life is not in a silo, right? But we have functioned in many respects with kids of putting them into silos that separate them from reality. So what I mean by that is, you do your elementary school, very critical development component. You get into middle school, your day changes, how it gets used, right? You now have to move between classes. You have to do a variety of new things, but it's all focused on doing well enough in a subject matter to continue to advance so that you are eligible to move to the next grade level, right? But that keeps you in a silo because there's not a lot of experiential component to the learning at that point, right? So I believe we have to pull the experiential piece of way younger in a child's development, because children do need to find something to hook onto that they know they're good at, right? I have a grandson who was struggling with some things in school, and all of a sudden realized that he was really good in math and that the other kids we're looking to him to get some help. It changed completely who he could be in his own eyes, because he now had something more than just being a good soccer or football, depending upon where you're living, player. And so it's those kinds of things. So I think, in answer to your question, that we have to, as a country, embrace the opportunity to have corporate America, everything beyond college, work more collaboratively with independent and public and charter schools at a younger age. We've got to raise the bar with expectation of what a teacher can do in the way of changing a child's future by giving them what they need, not simply what they need to have to be given a good evaluation at the end of the year. And I'm going to say this in a somewhat generic way. One of the things that's really exciting about MAI right now is the number of people we have had want a job with us in the teaching or the coaching who are saying education is not what it needs to be where I am right now. They can't change. They've been doing something for X number of years and they just want to keep doing the same thing because there's fear. Right? Kids don't need to be in an environment where there's fear. They need to be in an environment that lightens their load, makes their load more difficult to manage. So that's where I think we are different. That's where I think education is going to go, is we're going to de-silotize. We're doing that with MAI. We're going to do it on a larger level. The corporations that are interested in what we're doing, the corporate people who are coming to visit a building right now that's going through $83 million worth of renovation, and they see what we're paying attention to in that space, are without exception saying, boy, I wish I had had this opportunity because I would probably be a very different person today. Well, if we can do that for one child at a time, then we have been successful in what we're trying to do. Partner Cognita, which is based in England, has 90 plus schools around the world, 110,000 students. They wanted to be part of what we're doing because they recognize that education needs to go to where the learner is in a very different way than what it has traditionally around the world. And there are some good examples in some countries where that is changed already. We need to pay attention, not say, well, that's a different country, it's smaller, it's this, it's that. Listen, watch, and see where we should fit to make it something memorable for the kids across the planet, not just in certain parts or kids who have, at the age of 7, identified what their interest is. We can give all that opportunity. We've hit a home run.
Love that. Yeah, it's interesting. And leading into my next one, just going to call out a few points and sort of my experience. As you know, some of the listeners know myself, obviously. So you had mentioned like where we get siloed at a young age. And you often have, I think a lot of us can look back and be like, hey, there was a teacher or two or a coach or two that changed our lives, right? And I remember my 7th grade geometry teacher, she always just said to me, you could be as good at geometry as basketball if you cared as much, right? And it just sort of always thought about that, about anything where I go, hey, if I really wanted to learn Spanish, I could learn it. Like it sort of created this belief that I can do anything. It's just, you got to put the time and effort just like you do to basketball, just like you did, right? Which is cool. And then sort of leading that on, I had an amazing experience at Boston University, but I believe still a lot of the benefit just really comes from the network and then came from basketball, like where it's saying, oh, you were a D1 athlete. Oh, you know, you went to BU, you got this piece of paper, you got into this prestigious university, which I never would have gotten into without basketball. I really wasn't a good student. I knew how to play the game, which I think is another downside to a lot of educations, is I knew how to just, you know, not the right word, but like finesse the system to get the outcomes I needed, play the relationship. I knew how to do that well. I wasn't per se great at like actually caring about the workload. I just knew how to play the game. So I don't know how we solved that, but where I was leading is you're talking about how some of these students are, you know, let's call it 17, 18 years old, could go right into a very high level profession. I've always been, and again, I hate to say this just because I went there, but I believe a lot of times college, like I won't use the words I want to use, but I believe college is unnecessary. It seems like more a trap for most kids and parents and families than it is actually a benefit. I actually think my public education was in high school was harder than even BU, minus my concentration classes of finance and real estate. Those were, but all the other stuff, I was like, this is way easier and kind of pointless than my public school education. So how do you think about the next layer, which you're not as involved in as much? Is college even really worth it? Like if we're getting to the MAI, and you're building and finding the interest, to me, it seems like let's get people out there sooner than later. And, what happens, or how do you think through that? Because my belief is, and we'll see what happens with my kids, but I'm like, I don't really think college is worth it unless you're playing a sport or you want to be a doctor. There's obviously a few things that it makes sense for, but maybe not even, right? You just take a general you study chemistry. You could go right into residency. But anyway, sorry, I'll leave it up. I'm starting to, build my own answer and bias into it.
I do believe that there are kids that, if prepared beginning in the middle school experience, in a more dynamic way, let's say, than the traditional education environment provides. If they have that opportunity, they are better prepared to take steps right out of high school. Other countries have demonstrated that. And when I say professions, I mean professions, not vocations. There are a lot of things that used to be considered vocations, which have evolved into professions because technology has dictated how much more you have to know in order to be able to do the job that you are trained to do and do it well and efficiently. So all of that is changing. And I think that it has to start in that middle school experience. We are a 6th grade through post-grad institution. Middle school kids only can come to us as day students this first year, but we're likely to change that going forward because we have so many parents interested in giving these kids this opportunity to be in an environment like we're creating at a younger age, because they recognize that it gives a better opportunity for that child to figure out who they are, where they fit, and what they want to do, and when they want to do it. And when you start answering those questions and giving kids the platform to grow in that manner, you create a very different type of youth than what we see today, because they're youth with confidence. They're youth who understand who they are at a higher level and know how to use those skills, not only for themselves, but to help other people, right? So I think that's an important piece, because we, as an artist, as an athlete, yourself or others, it's very easy to just fit into the little box that we create of the people who like the jazz that we like, or the classical music, or like watching this team or watching that, as opposed to saying, how can I, with what I know, help somebody else to be a better learner? So the whole idea for us with that project-based learning platform in the middle school and working it up through is to give kids the real life experiences that they need every day in the classroom across the different subjects areas, which does not mean we're not teaching all the subjects in isolated periods of the day. They're integrated. They're integrated so that it's a common bonding experience for the kids to see how these pieces tie together. I think that creates a different child. I think it creates one may not need to go on to university. It may create somebody who doesn't need to go to university for 4 years in order to achieve what they achieve. And one could say now that you can dual enroll and you can take a lot of college courses while you're in high school, which is great. But I think there are 2 more steps in that process that aren't achievable right now that should be. I'm hopeful that with what we're building at MAI, that we are going to bridge the gap in education between middle and high school and the learning that takes place beyond high school, whether that's in the collegiate environment, whether it's going right into the workforce. In many professions today, corporate people remind me that they spend a tremendous amount of money training up a college graduate to be ready to work in their environment because of things that we haven't given those kids at an earlier age. If we do give it at an earlier age, it gives the opportunity for universities to think differently. And I do work with some universities now as not an advisor, but as a consultant person, to help them rethink what education needs to look like, because it's going to change. Whether we like it or not, it has to change for these kids. Otherwise, we're going to have more issues with more kids who are feeling that nobody cares about them, because there are a lot of good kids who don't feel they're worth much these days, and that's not fair. They didn't ask for that.
No, it's and I hope it does change, and I think it is, and I do think we're seeing that in real time with some of the, I don't even want to say AI, because it's really more just like, language models that are, spitting stuff back at us. But, as that technology all continues to evolve. So we like to keep these around 30 minutes. I could do this one for 3 hours. This is fascinating. This is right at all. Everyone knows I like the sports side, but I love the things that wedge into other areas. And now we're getting into education, which is just, it's the foundation of everything, right? So to me, it's so interesting. But you're meeting with the family and they're like, why, this model, why MAI, why should we come here? What's the pitch? What's the, here's why, here's what it's going to do. I'm curious how you phrase it up of like, this is, the two paths. If you go other way, you're going to be here. But if you come to MAI, you're going to be here. And that could be for athlete, artists, but also just generic education side as well.
I think we at MAI will be the best at demonstrating how much more youth are capable of achieving when put in an environment that, and the phrase is overused, whole child, but I believe that we are really working to ensure that we are focused on the whole child, which doesn't mean simply the child, but also the family, the siblings, of building a platform for that child to get up in the morning and feel that the sun is shining on them and that there's an opportunity for them to have a great day because they know that there's a team of people around them from each of those three different faculties and other administrative and anyone else that works in our environment. As I'm interviewing people to be part of our dining program, because nutrition is a very important piece of what we're doing, or people who are going to work in terms of maintaining our grounds, everyone has an opportunity to play a positive role in a child's life. All we have to do is open our arms, not literally, but figuratively, open our arms to listen to them, listen to what they need and go to where they are and help them see the path to what they want to achieve. If we do that consistently across all three faculties every day, I don't think there will be a reasonable comparison in the short term. There will be in the long term. Others will come into the marketplace and copy what we're doing and improve on it. And that's healthy. That's healthy. My goal always when creating businesses is to try to stay 30% ahead of the competition. That's what our goal is.
Love that. That's it's a fun time and it's compelling model what you guys are doing. And again, we could go for on and on about what happens here. Does this create sort of the new collegiate, sports ecosystem where now they're all playing each other and there's a push in the youth sports, and we could go so many different areas of this, but we'll round it out here. Rich, really appreciate you coming on. This has been awesome. We'll do, after you guys launch and you're in year 2 or whatever, we'll recalibrate it back up and see where things have gone, how far you guys have come along, what you've learned. And I'm sure just at how fast everything's progressing these days, there'll be a lot of other things in motion at that time as well, which will be super cool.
We should never stop learning.
My dad's line is, you got to learn how to learn. And then it's like, he'd always be like, you learn anything new today? And so it is interesting, the little phrases and things we put in our mind that really shape. We're not too much different, at least my thinking, from computers. We're very programmable, and it's and now the worlds are coming together. So it's fascinating times.